Hey guys, tonight we're gonna dive headfirst into a life you absolutely, unequivocally would not want to live. Imagine, if you will, the scent of damp earth and wood smoke, not from a cozy fireplace, but from the very walls of your existence. Feel the chills seep into your bones from a drafty, windowless hut. Hear the faint, persistent bleating of a few scraggly sheep, the only wealth your family possesses. This isn't some quaint historical reenactment. This is your life, right now, as a peasant born into the raw, unyielding embrace of the medieval age. You're entering a world where your daily survival hinges on sun and rain, where the closest thing to a doctor might be a village elder with a questionable poultice, and where your lifespan, well, let's just say you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Always curious to see how far these sleepy stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You feel a rough, calloused hand on your cheek, a touch both gentle and bewildered. The air is thick with the smell of unwashed bodies, stale straw, and something indefinably earthy. You're tiny, impossibly small, and the world is a blur of shadows and muted sounds. This is it. This is your arrival. You are born into a peasant hut, a place of bare necessity, where warmth is a luxury and privacy an alien concept. Your mother, exhausted from her labor, lies on a straw pallet, her face streaked with sweat and grime. Your father, a man whose hands are already gnarled by years of tilling unforgiving soil, hovers nearby, his relief palpable. There are no midwives with sanitized instruments, no crisp white sheets, just the grit and reality of life unfolding on a dirt floor. Your first cries are quickly hushed, not just by comforting arms, but by an innate understanding that loud noises can attract unwanted attention, even from spirits. You are swaddled in rough linen, probably hand-me-down scraps, and placed by the meager fire, its smoke stinging your eyes even at this tender age. Your name, if you're given one beyond a simple, practical moniker like Thomas or Agnes, will likely be a common one, rooted in the saint's calendar or a family tradition, reflecting the limited scope of this world. There's little room for poetic flourishes when every day is a struggle for existence. The concept of childhood, as we know it, simply doesn't exist. You are not a delicate flower to be nurtured and protected for years on end. From the moment you draw breath, you are a potential asset, another pair of hands, another mouth to feed that, with luck, will eventually contribute to the family's survival. Your infant days are a blur of hunger, sleep, and the constant threat of illness. Many like you don't make it past their first year, succumbing to fevers, coughs, or simple malnutrition. It's a stark, brutal winnowing process that medieval society simply accepts as the natural order. A mainstream historical fact often overlooked is the shockingly high infant mortality rate, sometimes exceeding 30 to 50% in the first year of life. It meant parents often hesitated to become too attached too quickly, a grim but practical coping mechanism. Your first toys are not carved wooden soldiers or delicate dolls, but perhaps a smooth river stone, a discarded bone, or a piece of tangled yarn. Your world is confined to the immediate vicinity of the hut, the small packed earth yard, the nearby path leading to the communal fields, and the thick, encircling woods that whisper of both resources and danger. You quickly learn to distinguish the sounds of your family, the grunts of the pigs, the distant crow of a rooster, all blending into the low hum of village life. One quirky tidbit about medieval child rearing is the widespread belief in overlaying the accidental smothering of an infant by a sleeping parent. To prevent this, some parents would place a wooden board or a hollowed-out log between themselves and the baby, creating a primitive, if not entirely safe, barrier. It speaks to a desperate attempt to protect their vulnerable offspring in a world devoid of modern medical understanding. Historians still argue whether overlaying was truly as common as reported, or if it served as a convenient explanation for sudden infant deaths that were likely due to other causes, such as illness or poor nutrition. But regardless, the fear was very real, a constant shadow in the early days of your life. You are a tiny, fragile spark in a vast, dark world, and every breath you take is a small victory. As your eyes slowly begin to focus, the most prominent feature of your early life is the hut itself. It's not a cozy cottage from a storybook. It's a single cramped room, perhaps 10 by 15 feet, shared with your parents, any siblings, and often, during the coldest months, a few of the family's smaller animals like chickens or a piglet. The walls are typically made of wattle and daub, a woven lattice of wooden strips, wattle, packed with a sticky mixture of wet soil, clay, straw, and sometimes even animal dung daub. The roof, pitched steeply to shed rain and snow, is thatched with straw or reeds, providing some insulation but also a favored nesting place for rodents and insects. There are no windows, at least not in the sense you understand them. Perhaps a small, unglazed opening high up near the roof line, too small for a person to fit through, allows a meager sliver of light and fresh air, but mostly serves to let out some of the smoke. The floor is simply packed earth, uneven and prone to becoming muddy in wet weather or dusty in dry spells. In the center, or perhaps slightly to one side, is the hearth, a simple stone-lined pit where a fire constantly smolders. This fire is the heart of your world. It provides warmth, cooks your meager meals, and offers the only consistent light after sunset. The smoke, however, has nowhere to go but up, eventually finding its way out through the roof, leaving a permanent, acrid smell that permeates everything and stings your eyes and lungs. It's a constant, low-level irritant that everyone simply endures. You certainly wouldn't have any concept of air purifiers or ventilation systems. This is just how the air is. Your bed is a pallet of straw laid directly on the dirt floor. It's shared with your siblings and probably your parents when you were a very young child. The straw is a breeding ground for fleas and lice, and it needs to be replaced regularly, a chore that will fall to you as you grow older. Blankets are coarse wool, itchy and heavy, offering barely enough protection against the biting cold of winter nights. Imagine trying to get comfortable, not just with the straw poking you, but with the constant scratching from unseen pests. Sleep is rarely truly restful. Your possessions are few, almost laughably so by modern standards. A few rough earthenware pots for cooking, wooden bowls and spoons for eating, a chest for storing what little food is available, and perhaps a small, precious collection of tools: a spade, a hoe, a sickle. Everything has a practical purpose. There is no room for decorative trinkets or sentimental clutter. Every object in the hut is a testament to necessity and survival. A quirky tidbit: to save money and resources, some medieval peasants would even sleep with their chickens or other small animals directly inside the hut, not just for warmth, but to protect them from predators at night. It sounds rather cozy until you remember the smell and the parasites. The concept of hygiene is, frankly, non-existent. Water is a precious commodity, fetched from the village well or a nearby stream, often a considerable distance away. It's used sparingly for drinking and cooking, rarely for washing bodies or clothes. You'll grow up knowing the pervasive smell of unwashed bodies, of animals, of cooking fires, and of the earth itself. The idea of a daily shower or fresh laundry would be utterly alien, a fantastical dream. Historians still argue whether the perceived lack of medieval hygiene contributed more to disease than malnutrition or specific infectious agents. Regardless, the impact on daily life was profound. You're always a little bit dirty, a little bit itchy, and completely unconcerned by it, because it is simply the way things are. As you begin to crawl, then toddle, your world expands to the edges of this single room. You learn to avoid the open flame, to recognize the different textures of the packed earth, the rough wood, the scratchy straw. The sounds of your parents' quiet conversations, the crackle of the fire, the rustling of straw, become the soundtrack to your earliest memories. This is your sanctuary, as humble and unadorned as it is. It keeps the worst of the weather out, and it holds your family close. It is, for all its discomforts, home. Your earliest childhood memories aren't filled with brightly colored toys or trips to the park. Instead, they're a blurred tapestry of simple chores and snatched moments of play. As soon as you can walk steadily, you're learning. You follow your mother, observing her movements as she grinds grain with a heavy hand mill or kneads dough on a worn wooden board. You watch your father mend a broken fence or sharpen a tool. Learning by observation and imitation is your primary mode of education, far removed from any formal schooling. Even as a toddler, you begin to contribute in small, unglamorous ways. Perhaps you're tasked with gathering dropped twigs for the fire, tiny hands fumbling with surprisingly heavy branches. Or you might be assigned to chase a stray chicken back into its coop, a game for you, but a vital task for the family's meager poultry supply. As you grow slightly older, maybe 5 or 6, your responsibilities increase. You're sent to fetch water from the well, the wooden bucket surprisingly heavy for your small arms, slopping cold water onto your thin tunic. You learn to tend to younger siblings, rocking a new baby, or keeping an eye on a crawling toddler, preventing them from wandering too close to the hearth or too far from the hut. This isn't babysitting. It's a necessary division of labor, as your parents are constantly engaged in more demanding tasks. Your play, when it happens, is unstructured and often incorporates elements of your daily life. There are no manufactured toys. You might fashion a doll from a corn cob or a piece of cloth, or carve a simple boat from a scrap of wood to float in a puddle after a rain shower. You play games of chase and hide and seek with other village children, often in the dusty lanes or at the edge of the fields. The boundaries are loose, the rules fluid, and supervision is minimal. Scrapes and bruises are common and largely ignored. There's no worried parent rushing you to an emergency room. You simply dust yourself off and keep going. This lack of oversight also means you learn quickly about the dangers of your environment. Deep puddles, sharp tools, unpredictable animals. A mainstream historical fact often overlooked is that while childhood mortality was high, those who survived developed a remarkable resilience and practical skill set from a very young age. One quirky tidbit is the prevalence of games involving stones or sticks, mimicking adult activities. Children might build miniature huts, plow tiny fields with sticks, or hunt small creatures, all in preparation for the roles they would inevitably fill. You might even join in simple singing games or listen to older villagers tell folk tales around the fire, tales of sprites, giants, and saints that blend entertainment with moral instruction. These stories, passed down orally, are your literature, your escape, your history lessons. The division of labor begins early, often along gender lines. As a young girl, you'll spend more time with your mother, learning to spin wool, to mend clothes, to prepare food. You'll become adept at foraging for wild berries, nuts, and edible greens, a crucial supplement to the family diet. As a young boy, you'll accompany your father to the fields, learning to identify different crops, to understand the rhythm of plowing and sowing, to handle basic tools. You might be tasked with scaring away birds from newly sown seeds, or helping to herd the family's few animals. You are an apprentice from the moment you are able to assist. Historians still argue whether medieval children were truly miniature adults in their responsibilities, or if there was a recognized period of childhood, albeit a very brief one, before full integration into adult labor. What is clear, however, is that your contribution to the household economy is expected and necessary, not a choice. Your learning is practical, tangible, and immediate. There are no abstract concepts, no theoretical problems to solve. It's all about the here and now, about survival, about doing your part. And for all the hardship, there are moments of simple joy. The warmth of the sun on your face, the taste of a sweet wild berry, the shared laughter with a friend, or the deep satisfaction of having completed a task that genuinely helped your family. These small victories are the highlights of your very short, very busy childhood. The fleeting days of unstructured play quickly give way to the more rigorous demands of adolescence and apprenticeship. You're no longer just a small helper. Your body is growing, strengthening, and with that comes the expectation of more significant, sustained labor. This transition typically begins around the age of 7 or 8, gradually increasing until by your early teens, you are performing tasks that are essentially adult in their physical demands and importance to the household economy. There's no teenage angst about college applications or career paths. Your path is laid out before you, inherited from your parents and dictated by the land. If you are a boy, you will spend more and more time working alongside your father and other men in the fields. You learn the precise rhythm of broadcasting seeds, the strain of guiding a wooden plow pulled by an ox, the backbreaking stoop of weeding rows by hand. You learn to recognize different types of soil, to predict the weather by the clouds, to understand the subtle signs of healthy crops and the ominous warnings of blight. You become proficient with a scythe, a dangerous tool that demands respect and skill. Your hands toughen, calluses form, and your muscles ache at the end of each long day. It's an apprenticeship of necessity, passed down through generations, each lesson a practical skill vital for survival. You might also learn basic carpentry, how to mend a roof, or how to care for the few animals the family owns. For girls, your apprenticeship deepens within the confines of the home and the village. You learn the intricate processes of food preservation, smoking meat, salting fish, drying herbs. You become skilled at spinning raw wool into thread using a drop spindle, a monotonous but crucial task. Then comes weaving, a more complex skill, turning that thread into rough cloth for clothing and blankets. You learn to bake bread in the communal oven, to milk the family cow, if you're lucky enough to have one, and to churn butter. Foraging for wild edibles in the woods and meadows becomes a specialized knowledge passed from mother to daughter, identifying edible plants from poisonous ones, knowing when and where to find berries, mushrooms, and nuts. This knowledge isn't just a hobby. It can mean the difference between a meager meal and outright starvation. A mainstream historical fact is that the division of labor was remarkably strict, with both boys and girls learning highly specialized skills essential for the self-sufficiency of the peasant household. There's no formal schooling, of course, beyond the occasional lesson from the local priest, perhaps learning a few prayers or rudimentary catechism. Literacy is almost unheard of for peasants. Your education is entirely practical. You learn to count through tally marks, to measure by eye, to navigate by the sun and stars. Your understanding of the world is shaped by direct experience, by the wisdom passed down orally, and by the rhythms of nature. One quirky tidbit: some peasant communities had playwork traditions where adolescent boys would compete in mock plowing or harvesting contests, turning arduous tasks into a form of competitive sport, albeit still serving a practical purpose. It was a way to instill diligence and skill while also fostering community bonds. Imagine a primitive strongman competition, but with real-world consequences if you weren't strong enough. Historians still argue about the extent to which these games actually relieve the drudgery versus simply reinforcing the inescapable labor expectations. But for you, it's just another part of growing up, another challenge to overcome. As you navigate these formative years, you're becoming acutely aware of your place in the social hierarchy. You are a peasant, tied to the land, beholden to the lord of the manor. Your future is not one of choice or upward mobility, but of continuity off replicating the life your parents have led. The idea of leaving the village, seeking a different path, is almost unthinkable, not just because of practical limitations, but because it challenges the very fabric of your existence. Your identity is deeply intertwined with your family, your village, and the soil you work. This period of your life solidifies your role, transforming you from a child into a valuable, if perpetually impoverished, member of the medieval agrarian workforce. Your body hardens, your skills sharpen, and your spirit, though perhaps burdened, also grows resilient in the face of constant demands. Your entire existence is framed by the never-ending, often desperate quest for food. It's not just about what you eat, it's about the constant, gnawing anxiety of if you will eat and how little there will be. Your diet is astonishingly monotonous, built almost entirely around cereals. Think of it: bread, porridge, and ale. That's your food pyramid, if you can even call it a pyramid. The primary grain is usually rye or barley, occasionally oats, crops that are hardy enough to grow in poorer soils and colder climates. Wheat is often a luxury, reserved for the Lord or for special occasions, if at all. You start your day, if you're lucky, with a thick bowl of porridge cooked over the open fire, maybe flavored with a few wild herbs if your mother has been able to gather them. Your main meal, eaten in the middle of the day, will be a hefty chunk of coarse, dark bread, often so dense it feels like a brick. This bread isn't soft and airy. It's heavy, chewy, and designed to fill you up with calories, even if it scrapes your throat a little on the way down. Along with the bread, you might have some boiled vegetables from the family garden: cabbage, onions, leeks, or peas if the harvest has been good. Meat is a rarity, a luxury for feast days or after a successful hunt. Though hunting is often forbidden to peasants, a privilege of a lord. If you do get meat, it's usually salted pork or perhaps a scrawny chicken, stretched as far as it can possibly go among the entire family. A mainstream historical fact is that the average peasant diet was severely lacking in protein and fresh produce, leading to widespread nutritional deficiencies. Fats are scarce, often derived from animal lard or butter, if you have a cow or pig. Sweeteners are almost non-existent. Honey is precious, a rare treat. Your drink of choice? Ale. Not fancy, hoppy ale, but a thin, weak brew made from fermented grain. It's often safer to drink than the local water, which can be contaminated, and it provides some much-needed calories. Children even drink a weaker version of ale. The idea of clean, potable water on tap is as alien as flying to the moon. But beyond the blandness, the constant shadow hanging over every meal is famine. The medieval world is a precarious place. A bad harvest due to too much rain, too little sun, an early frost, or an infestation of pests can decimate your crops. And when the crops fail, there's no national reserve, no food banks, no aid from distant lands. Your family, your village, is utterly dependent on the immediate yield of the land. The consequences of famine are swift and brutal. People grow gaunt, their eyes sunken, their movements slow. They become susceptible to every passing illness. You might see neighbors or even family members sicken and die from sheer hunger, their bodies too weak to fight. Your stomach often rumbles, a dull ache that becomes a constant companion, especially during the lean months of winter or before the next harvest. One quirky tidbit about medieval diets is the consumption of potage, a thick vegetable-based stew that could be endlessly varied with whatever was available. It was a communal dish, constantly simmering over the fire, with new ingredients added as they were acquired. It's the ultimate use-what-you-have meal, ensuring nothing went to waste. Historians still argue about the true caloric intake of the average peasant. Some suggest it was surprisingly high on good years due to the sheer volume of grain consumed, while others emphasize the significant periods of caloric deficit. But the experience for you is one of constant, low-level hunger, occasionally punctuated by outright starvation. You learn to be resourceful, to glean leftover grains from harvested fields, to gather wild berries and mushrooms, if you dare, knowing some are poisonous, to seek out whatever meager bounty nature provides. Every scrap of food is valued, every crumb swept up. Waste is an unthinkable luxury. This relentless focus on food shapes your daily actions, your conversations, and your deepest anxieties. It's a life lived on the brink, where one bad season can mean the difference between scraping by and succumbing to the brutal reality of an empty belly. Your world, in essence, is your village. It's a tightly knit, insular community, often no more than a few dozen families, perhaps 100 souls at most. Everyone knows everyone else, their quirks, their strengths, their weaknesses. There's no escaping the watchful eyes of your neighbors, but there's also a profound sense of interdependence. Survival itself hinges on cooperation. You live and die by the shared rhythms of this small cluster of huts and the fields that surround them. The village is typically centered around a few key features: the communal well, the church, perhaps a blacksmith's forge, and the Lord's manor house, though the Lord might live in a larger castle elsewhere. And as local representative, the bailiff would be the most visible authority. The church, even if it's just a small, humble building, is the spiritual and often social heart of the community. Here, baptisms, marriages, and burials take place. Here, the local priest, perhaps the only literate person in your world, delivers sermons that mix religious instruction with practical advice and moral warnings. These services are the closest thing you have to weekly entertainment and a connection to something larger than your immediate struggles. Life in the village is governed by the agricultural calendar and the feudal system. Every task, from plowing to harvesting, from sheep shearing to fence mending, is often done communally, or at least in coordination with your neighbors. You help your neighbor with their harvest, and they, in turn, help you. This system of reciprocal aid, known as mutual obligation, is not out of pure altruism, but a hard-won necessity. If your neighbor's crops fail, it impacts the entire village's ability to pay taxes to the Lord or to survive the winter. A mainstream historical fact is that shared labor, such as the communal plowing of strips in the open field system, was fundamental to medieval peasant agriculture. Social gatherings are simple but vital. Market days, if your village is large enough to host one or close to a larger town, are rare opportunities for news and limited trade. Feast days, tied to the Christian calendar, break the relentless monotony of labor. These are days for simple celebrations, perhaps a shared meal, some rough music played on pipes or drums, and perhaps even some dancing. These moments of collective joy, however brief, are cherished. They're the pressure release valves in a life of constant toil. One quirky tidbit: many medieval villages had designated gossip stones or specific spots where women would gather while fetching water or doing laundry. These informal social hubs were crucial for sharing information, news, and, yes, the occasional juicy rumor. It was the medieval equivalent of social media, but with more actual human interaction and less filtered content. Historians still argue whether medieval peasant communities were truly as egalitarian as they sometimes appear in their internal workings, or if subtle power dynamics and social hierarchies existed even within the unfree population. But for you, the village is your extended family, a source of both constant scrutiny and unwavering support. Disputes, when they arise, are typically settled by the village elders or the Lord's bailiff, rather than formal legal systems. Justice is often swift and rough, focused on maintaining order and productivity. The concept of individual rights is largely non-existent. Your rights are tied to your obligations to the Lord and to the community. You learn early that deviating from accepted norms can lead to ostracism, a terrifying prospect in a world where isolation means almost certain death. This strong sense of community, for all its limitations, provides a psychological buffer against the overwhelming hardships of daily life. You are never truly alone, even if you sometimes wish for a moment of solitude. Your identity is inseparable from the collective, and your fate is bound to theirs. As you approach your late teens, the matter of marriage and family formation becomes less a romantic ideal and more a practical, inevitable step. Love, as you might understand it today, is a secondary concern, a lucky bonus if it happens to blossom. Your marriage is an economic and social necessity, a strategic alliance between two families designed to ensure the continuation of the peasant household and its labor force. You are not looking for a soulmate. You are looking for a reliable partner to work the land, raise children, and endure the hardships of life alongside you. Arranged marriages are common, sometimes decided by your parents when you're still very young, though the actual ceremony might not occur until both you and your prospective spouse are deemed old enough and strong enough to contribute fully. For a young man, this usually means demonstrating the ability to work the fields, to provide for a family, and perhaps to inherit a share of the family's land, or at least the right to work it. For a young woman, it involves showcasing skills in household management, child-rearing, and the myriad of domestic tasks that keep a home running. Your value is measured in your capacity for labor and your potential for offspring. The wedding itself is a simple affair, likely held in the village church, followed by a modest celebration. There are no extravagant gowns or elaborate banquets. Perhaps new, but still plain, tunics for the bride and groom, and a shared meal with your families and close neighbors. The community comes together to mark this significant event, a continuation of the cycle of life that sustains the village. The dowry, if there is one, might be a few household goods, a small sum of coins, or simply the agreement that the bride brings her labor and potential offspring to the new household. A mainstream historical fact often overlooked is that while marriages were arranged, peasant couples often developed deep bonds of companionship and affection born out of shared struggle and mutual reliance. Life as a newly married couple means taking on full adult responsibilities. If you are the eldest son, you might inherit a portion of your father's land rights, or perhaps a new, small hut will be built for you near the family home. If you are a daughter, you move into your husband's household, joining his family's daily routines. The immediate goal is clear: to start having children. Childbirth is a dangerous, often fatal, endeavor for medieval women, and infant mortality remains tragically high. Yet, children are essential. They are your old age insurance, your labor force for the future, and the only way to ensure the continuity of your family line. You expect to have many children, knowing that only some will likely survive to adulthood. It's a somber reality, but one you accept without question. One quirky tidbit: some medieval marriage customs involved the public consumption of a bride cake or a wedding loaf, a simple bread broken over the bride's head, symbolizing fertility and good fortune. Guests would scramble for crumbs, believing they would bring luck. Imagine your wedding day involving a mild concussion from a stale loaf. Historians still argue about the true agency of medieval peasants in their marriage choices. While parents played a dominant role, evidence suggests that young people often had some say, especially in refusing truly undesirable matches, as harmonious households were more productive. But ultimately, personal preference was always secondary to economic viability. Your days are now spent in tandem with your spouse, a partnership forged in necessity and strengthened by shared toil. You work side by side in the fields, in the hut, raising your children, facing lean times and good times together. There is a deep, unspoken understanding that develops, a reliance on each other that transcends mere affection. This union is the bedrock of your peasant existence, the unit through which all labor, all sustenance, and all hope for the future flow. You are no longer just an individual. You are part of a new, vital family unit, bound to the land and to each other by the unbreakable ties of medieval life. Your life, once you are fully established in your own household, becomes an unbreakable cycle dictated by the agricultural rhythms of the year. There's no 9 to 5, no weekends, no holidays beyond the occasional feast day. Your schedule is the sun, the seasons, and the relentless demands of the earth. Every month brings its own set of arduous tasks, and your very survival hinges on your ability to meet them. You become intimately familiar with the nuances of the weather, the subtle changes in the soil, and the specific needs of each crop. Spring is a season of desperate hope and backbreaking labor. As the last of the snow melts and the ground begins to thaw, the plowing begins. You and your family, perhaps with the help of a borrowed ox or a neighbor, will painstakingly turn over the heavy soil of your strips in the communal fields. This is incredibly hard work, pulling or guiding a wooden plow through stubborn earth, your muscles screaming by dusk. After plowing comes sowing, scattering the precious seeds by hand, hoping for good yield. This period is filled with anxiety. Too much rain can wash away the seeds, too little can prevent germination. You also begin tending to the family garden, planting vegetables, and perhaps shearing the sheep, gathering their precious wool for spinning. Summer brings the warmth, but no respite. This is the season of weeding, an endless, monotonous task performed under the hot sun. You stoop for hours, pulling out weeds that threaten to choke your crops, your back aching, your hands calloused and dirty. You might also be tasked with guarding the fields from birds and other pests, spending long days shooing away hungry animals. The long daylight hours mean longer work days, stretching from dawn until dusk. As summer progresses, the anticipation of the harvest builds, a mixture of hope and dread. Autumn is the peak of a year's labor, the harvest. This is the most critical period, the culmination of all your efforts. You work feverishly, cutting down the ripened grain with sickles, gathering it into sheaves, and transporting it back to the village. The threshing begins, beating the grain to separate the kernels from the stalks, a dusty, exhausting job often done by hand or with flails. This is a communal effort with everyone in the village, young and old, contributing. The success or failure of the harvest determines whether your family will eat through the winter. After the grain is stored, often in communal barns or your own meager granary, you might begin preparations for the next planting season, perhaps spreading manure on the fields to replenish the soil. A mainstream historical fact is that poor harvests were the single greatest cause of famine, demonstrating the absolute dependence on this annual cycle. Winter brings a different kind of hardship. With the fields dormant, your focus shifts to maintenance, repairs, and survival. You mend tools, weave baskets, spin and weave cloth, and care for the animals. Firewood must be constantly gathered and chopped to keep the hut warm. Food becomes scarce, and you rely on your stored provisions, carefully rationing every morsel. The cold is relentless, seeping into your bones, and illness is a constant threat. Your days are shorter, darker, and often filled with repetitive indoor chores. One quirky tidbit: some peasant communities would hold harvest festivals after the crops were brought in, often involving symbolic rituals like crowning a harvest queen or parading a last sheaf of grain. These were not merely celebrations, but also attempts to appease spirits and ensure future fertility of the land. It's like a medieval Oscar night, but for actual sustenance. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants truly understood the science behind crop rotation, or if their practices were simply born of generations of trial and error, a pragmatic adaptation to the land's needs. Regardless, for you, it is an instinctual knowledge absorbed from birth of how to coax sustenance from the stubborn earth. Your life is an endless, arduous dance with the seasons, a testament to resilience and the unyielding demands of your agrarian existence. In your medieval world, disease isn't an abstract concept discussed in medical journals. It's a terrifying, ever-present reality that stalks every household. It's not a matter of if you'll get sick, but when and how severely. Your body is a fragile vessel, constantly exposed to pathogens, lacking any of the modern defenses we take for granted. Cleanliness is a foreign concept. Nutrition is often inadequate, and medical knowledge is, to put it mildly, rudimentary. A simple cut can turn deadly from infection. A common cold can escalate into a fatal pneumonia, and outbreaks of more severe illnesses like dysentery, measles, or influenza can sweep through a village, leaving a trail of devastation. You've seen it firsthand: neighbors with swollen glands, children feverish and convulsing, the elderly simply fading away. The sheer arbitrariness of it is terrifying. One day, a family member is strong, working the fields. The next, they are racked with fever, their breath coming in ragged gasps. There are no hospitals, no clinics, no ambulances. Illness is faced within the cramped confines of your hut, often on the same straw pallet where you sleep. When sickness strikes, your recourse is limited. Your mother or an elder might apply poultices of herbs, perhaps some concoction passed down through generations, their effectiveness more rooted in folklore than pharmacology. Prayers are offered to saints, charms are worn, and superstitious rituals are performed to ward off evil spirits believed to cause sickness. The local priest might offer spiritual comfort, but rarely any practical cure. If your village is large enough, there might be a wise woman or a rudimentary barber surgeon who performs bloodletting or pulls teeth, but their methods are often painful and sometimes harmful. A mainstream historical fact is that practices like bloodletting, based on the ancient theory of humors, were widely practiced but often weakened already ill patients. The bubonic plague, or Black Death, which ravaged Europe in the mid-14th century, stands as a stark, chilling testament to the medieval world's vulnerability. While you may not experience this specific pandemic, you live in a world where such an event is always a terrifying possibility. The constant threat of contagion means that death is a familiar face, a constant companion. You grow up witnessing death, from infants to the aged, with a stoicism born of exposure and powerlessness. Grief is profound, but there's little time for prolonged mourning. The work of survival demands your immediate attention. One quirky tidbit. Medieval medical practitioners often relied on urine samples as a diagnostic tool, meticulously examining the color, clarity, and even taste, yes, taste, of a patient's urine to determine imbalances in their humors. Imagine a doctor telling you to pee in a cup, and then drinking it to diagnose your cold. Historians still argue whether medieval people understood the concept of contagion in any rudimentary way, beyond associating illness with bad air, miasma, or divine punishment. But for you, the experience is simply one of fear, suffering, and a desperate hope for recovery, without understanding the invisible forces at play. Your resilience is tested daily, not just by hunger and hard labor, but by the ever-present shadow of sickness. Your very existence, from the moment you are born until the day you die, is inextricably linked to the Lord of the manor. You are not a free individual. You are a serf, bound to the land, and, by extension, to the Lord who owns it. This isn't a landlord-tenant agreement you might recognize. It's a fundamental aspect of the feudal system, a complex web of obligations and services that defines medieval society. The Lord is the ultimate authority in your life, holding power over your land, your labor, and often your personal choices. Your village is part of the Lord's manor, a large estate that provides him with wealth, soldiers, and prestige. In return for a small strip of land to cultivate for your own family's sustenance, you owe the Lord numerous duties. First and foremost are your labor services. This means dedicating a significant portion of your week, often 2 or 3 days, to working directly on the Lord's domain, his private lands. You plow his fields, sow his seeds, harvest his crops, and maintain his buildings before you even touch your own plot. Imagine working a full-time job for someone else, then coming home to start your actual full-time job. It's a relentless demand on your time and energy. Beyond labor, you owe the Lord a variety of dues and payments. This might be a portion of your own harvest, a certain number of chickens or eggs, or even a small sum of coins if you manage to acquire any. You pay a fee to use the Lord's mill to grind your grain, his oven to bake your bread, and his wine press for your grapes, if you have any. These are not optional services. They are monopolies, enforced by the Lord's authority. You cannot simply go to a rival miller. There isn't one. You also need the Lord's permission to marry, to move away, a rare and almost impossible feat, or for your children to inherit your land. This power dynamic means the Lord's bailiff, his local administrator, is a constant, often unwelcome, presence in your life, ensuring that all obligations are met. A mainstream historical fact is that serfdom, while varying in its severity across different regions, effectively tied peasants to the land and the Lord, limiting their freedom and mobility. The Lord's protection is the theoretical justification for your subservience. He is supposed to defend you from raiders, to provide justice in disputes, and to maintain order. In reality, this protection often feels abstract, especially when weighed against the immediate burden of his demands. Your fear of the Lord's power is real. He holds the right to punish you for disobedience, ranging from fines to physical retribution. The concept of rights, as you might understand them, simply doesn't apply to you. One quirky tidbit about the Lord's rights was the marchet, a fee a female serf had to pay her lord if she married someone from outside his manor. It was a payment for the loss of her future offspring's labor, demonstrating the Lord's ownership not just of the land, but of the very bodies of his serfs. It was essentially a medieval export tariff on human beings. Historians still argue whether the relationship between lord and peasant was purely exploitative or of a sense of paternalism and mutual obligation, even if unequal, sometimes softened the harsh realities of serfdom. But for you, the lord is a distant, powerful figure, his wealth and comfort built directly upon your sweat and toil. Your life is lived entirely within the boundaries of his control, a constant reminder of your unfree status. In your world, religion is not a Sunday morning activity. It is the very fabric of daily life, interwoven with every task, every fear, and every hope. The Christian Church, specifically the Roman Catholic Church, holds immense power and influence, shaping your understanding of the universe, morality, and your ultimate destiny. You are born into a society where salvation is paramount, and the fear of eternal damnation is a powerful motivator. The village church, no matter how small or humble, is the most important building after the Lord's Manor. It's where you're baptized as an infant, where you attend Mass on feast days, where you witness marriages, and where the dead are laid to rest. The local priest, often one of the few literate people in the village, is not just a spiritual guide, but a central figure in community life, offering counsel, mediating disputes, and explaining the mysteries of the faith. His sermons, delivered in Latin but often translated or explained to the local vernacular, reinforce the social order, emphasizing obedience to God, to the Lord, and to your station in life. A mainstream historical fact is that the church provided much of the social welfare and education, however limited, available in medieval peasant communities. Your understanding of God is rooted in a literal interpretation of biblical stories and the lives of saints. You believe in heaven and hell, in angels and demons, and in the constant battle between good and evil. You might go on local pilgrimages to nearby shrines, seeking blessings or cures for illnesses, walking for days, carrying simple offerings. You might wear religious amulets or pray constantly, hoping to ward off misfortune or illness. The cycles of the church calendar, Lent, Easter, Advent, Christmas, provide a different rhythm to the year, punctuated by fasting and feasting, offering a spiritual counterpoint to the agricultural demands. But alongside official doctrine, your life is also deeply imbued with superstition and ancient folk beliefs that predate Christianity. These aren't seen as contradictory. They exist in parallel, offering practical explanations and remedies for the unpredictable world around you. You might believe in fairies dwelling in the woods, in mischievous imps who spoil milk, or in the malevolent glare of the evil eye that can bring sickness or bad luck. Charms are worn not just for religious protection, but for good fortune in the fields. Specific rituals are performed at planting or harvest time to ensure a bountiful yield, blending Christian prayers with pagan practices aimed at appeasing the spirits of a land. One quirky tidbit is the widespread belief in animal familiars or animal omens. A black cat crossing your path, an owl hooting at night, or the way birds fly could all be interpreted as signs or warnings from the spirit world. It was less about witches, more about a deep, intuitive connection to nature and its perceived spiritual inhabitants. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants fully distinguished between Orthodox Christian belief and these more ancient, animistic traditions, or if they simply viewed them as different facets of a unified spiritual reality. Regardless, for you, these beliefs provide a framework for understanding an often bewildering and dangerous world, offering a sense of control where there is often none. Your faith, in all its forms, is your ultimate comfort and your greatest fear, shaping your daily actions and providing a glimpse of hope beyond the relentless toil of your earthly existence. While your life is largely confined to the boundaries of your village and its surrounding fields, there are rare, momentous occasions when you might experience occasional travel and trade. These aren't leisure trips or vacations. They are born of necessity, offering a fleeting glimpse of a world beyond your familiar horizons. For most peasants, the furthest they ever venture is to a nearby market town or perhaps a pilgrimage site. The journey itself is an ordeal. There are no paved roads, just dusty tracks that turn into muddy quagmires with the slightest rain. You walk, perhaps leading a laden donkey if your family is fortunate enough to possess one. The journey is slow, arduous, and potentially dangerous. Bandits are a real threat, and the wilderness between villages can be unforgiving. You might spend nights sleeping under the stars, or if lucky, in the rough hospitality of another peasant hut along the way. The sensory experience is profound. New smells, different accents, and the sheer vastness of the world outside your immediate perception. Your destination, often a larger market town, is a cacophony of sights and sounds compared to your quiet village. Imagine the bustling market square, alive with merchants hawking their wares, craftsmen shouting about their goods, and people from different villages exchanging news and gossip. This is where you might attempt to trade any surplus goods your family has managed to produce, perhaps a few eggs, a small amount of spun wool, or a carefully tended animal. You're not dealing in large sums of money. Trade is often conducted through barter, exchanging your goods directly for something you need, like a new tool, a better quality of fabric, or a small amount of salt, a precious commodity. A mainstream historical fact is that periodic markets and fairs were vital hubs for economic exchange and social interaction for medieval peasants. Despite the challenges of travel, beyond the immediate transaction, these trips offer a window into a different social stratum. You might see traveling merchants in finer clothes, perhaps even a knight or a noble on horseback, a stark reminder of the vast social gulf between your station and theirs. You hear snippets of news from distant lands, rumors of wars, or stories of new inventions, though these likely hold little immediate relevance to your daily struggle for survival. The experience can be both exhilarating and overwhelming, confirming that a larger, more complex world exists, but one you can only ever observe from its fringes. One quirky tidbit: some medieval travelers would carry a pilgrim's staff, a sturdy walking stick often with a hook for carrying a small bundle. These staffs could also serve as a rudimentary defensive weapon against wild animals or brigands, making them a practical and symbolic companion for any journey. Historians still argue about the frequency of peasant travel. Some believe it was more common than previously thought, especially for seasonal labor or religious reasons, while others maintain that most peasants rarely left their village boundaries. But for you, any journey beyond your familiar fields is an adventure, a brief escape from the monotony, and a chance to witness something truly new before you return to the predictable rhythms of your peasant life. The memories of these rare excursions linger, providing fodder for quiet reflection long after the dust of the road has settled. Life as a medieval peasant is inherently precarious, and while your primary focus is always on survival, there are moments when the deep-seated injustices of your existence boil over. You hear whispers, hushed conversations around the fire or in the fields about the unfairness of the Lord's demands, the crushing burden of taxes, and the seemingly endless cycle of labor. These murmurs can sometimes coalesce into genuine rebellions and social unrest, dramatic but often tragically futile attempts to shake off the shackles of serfdom. You might witness or hear stories of peasants from other manors, driven to desperation by famine, excessive rents, or harsh treatment, rising up against their lords. These are not organized armies. They're often spontaneous, desperate uprisings, fueled by hunger and righteous anger. Peasants, armed with scythes, pitchforks, and whatever crude weapons they can fashion, might march on a lord's manor, sometimes burning down buildings or even attacking the lord officials. The initial fury can be terrifyingly effective, fueled by years of pent-up resentment. A mainstream historical fact is that significant peasant revolts, such as the Peasants' Revolt in England, 1381, or the Jacquerie in France, 1358, demonstrated the deep-seated grievances of the unfree population. However, these rebellions are almost invariably met with brutal suppression. The lords, with their trained knights and soldiers, are far better organized and equipped. The retribution is swift and merciless. Leaders are executed, participants are fined, mutilated, or killed, and the surviving peasants are forced back into an even more oppressive system, often with harsher laws and increased restrictions. The message is clear. Resistance is futile, and the established order is unshakable. You learn to internalize this lesson, even as the desire for a fairer life churns beneath the surface. The sight of a burned-out manor or the news of a brutal reprisal sends a chilling reminder of your powerlessness. One quirky tidbit: some peasant revolts were sparked not just by economic hardship, but also by religious or prophetic figures who preached messages of social equality, drawing on biblical interpretations. Imagine a charismatic preacher telling you that when Adam delved and Eve span, who then was the gentleman? A radical idea in a world of rigid hierarchy. Historians still argue whether these revolts were truly revolutionary in their aims, seeking to fundamentally dismantle the feudal system, or if they were primarily conservative movements, aiming only to alleviate immediate burdens and restore perceived ancient customs. But for you, the peasant, the stakes are existential. It's a gamble between continued suffering and a fleeting, dangerous hope for change. You feel the stirrings of anger, the desire for something better, but you also understand the crushing weight of the Lord's power and the high cost of defiance. The thought of joining such a desperate cause is a terrifying internal debate, weighed against the very real possibility of losing everything. Your body, once strong and resilient, begins its inevitable decline as you enter old age. There's no concept of retirement, no pension, no golden years of leisure. You work until you physically cannot work anymore, until your body, worn down by decades of relentless labor, simply gives out. By your 50s, if you even reach them, a significant achievement in itself, given the average life expectancy, you are considered truly old, a survivor of countless hardships. Your joints ache constantly, stiff from years of stooping, lifting, and plowing. Your back is perpetually sore, your hands gnarled and arthritic, perhaps twisted by repetitive tasks. Your eyesight dims, making fine work like spinning or mending difficult. Your teeth, if you have any left, are worn down or long gone, making the coarse peasant diet even harder to chew. You move slower, tire more easily, and the fierce chill of winter bites deeper into your bones. A mainstream historical fact is that severe arthritis, spinal degeneration, and dental issues were almost universal among medieval peasants by middle age due to their physically demanding lives and poor diet. Despite your diminishing physical capacity, you still contribute. You might be tasked with lighter duties, tending to young children, watching over animals closer to the hut, mending tools, or preparing simple meals. Your value shifts from brute strength to accumulated wisdom. You are a repository of knowledge about the land, the weather, the old ways, and the history of the village. Younger family members might consult you on planting times, remedies for sick animals, or the best places to forage. Your stories and memories become vital threads in the oral tradition of the community, passing down knowledge and folklore to the next generation. You are still an active member of the household, just in a different capacity. There's a quiet dignity in this transition, recognition of your long service. However, there's also the very real fear of becoming a burden. In a world of subsistence, every mouth must justify its consumption. While families generally care for their elders, times of famine or extreme hardship can place immense strain on these arrangements. You have seen elderly neighbors simply fade away during lean winters, unable to withstand the cold and lack of food. One quirky tidbit: some medieval medical texts offered advice on how to slow the aging process, often involving bizarre diets or elaborate herbal concoctions, none of which, predictably, worked. Imagine trying to reverse decades of manual labor with a special herbal tea. Historians still argue about the social standing of the elderly in medieval peasant society. Some suggest they held significant respect as repositories of knowledge and tradition, while others emphasize the economic pressures that could marginalize them. But for you, the reality is a gradual winding down, a slowing of the relentless pace, punctuated by increasing physical discomfort and a quiet reflection on the life you've led. Your body is a testament to the brutal demands of your existence, a living map of every furrow plowed, every sheaf harvested, every bitter winter endured. The final, inevitable chapter of your life is death. In your medieval world, death isn't hidden away in sterile hospitals. It's an intimate, public event, unfolding within the very hut where you were born and lived your entire existence. As your body weakens, the family gathers around your straw pallet. There are no elaborate medical interventions, just the quiet comfort of loved ones, their faces etched with a familiar mixture of sorrow and weary acceptance. Your final moments might be marked by a priest administering the last rites, offering spiritual solace and absolving your sins, preparing your soul for its journey. The air might be filled with hushed prayers and the flickering light of a single candle. There's no panic or desperate fight against the end. It's seen as a natural, if sorrowful, transition. You breathe your last, and a profound stillness descends upon the cramped space. Your body is prepared simply. It's washed, perhaps wrapped in a linen shroud, and then carried out of the hut, usually within a day, to prevent disease and because of the lack of proper preservation methods. There's no ornate coffin, perhaps just a simple wooden board or a shallow basket if your family can afford it. The entire village might gather to mourn, a shared sorrow for a life lived among them, for another pair of hands lost to the community. You are buried in the consecrated ground of the village churchyard, often in an unmarked grave or with a simple wooden cross that will soon rot away. Your physical presence vanishes, absorbed back into the earth you toiled for so long. Your afterlife beliefs are deeply ingrained, a comforting counterpoint to the hardships of your earthly existence. You believe in a distinct heaven and hell, and the concept of purgatory, a place where souls are purified before entering heaven, offers hope even for those who committed minor sins. Your life of hard labor and adherence to the Church's teachings is believed to grant you passage to eternal salvation. You envision a paradise free from hunger, cold, and toil, a reward for your unwavering faith and endurance. A mainstream historical fact is that the fear of purgatory and hell spurred widespread devotion to saints and practices like indulgences, even among the poorest peasants. The memory of you persists in the village for a time, passed down through stories and the continuation of your family line. Your children and grandchildren will carry on your name, your skills, and your struggles, repeating the cycle you have just completed. Your life, like those before you and those who will come after, becomes part of the silent, enduring narrative of the medieval peasantry. One quirky tidbit: it was common in some regions for medieval peasants to be buried facing east, anticipating the second coming of Christ, and sometimes with a small stone or object in their hand, believed to aid them in the resurrection. Imagine being tucked into the earth with a tiny souvenir for your next great adventure. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants truly accepted their difficult lot in life with resignation, or if their faith provided genuine solace and hope for a better existence beyond this earthly one. But for you, as the final breath leaves your body, the vast, silent promise of the afterlife, a release from earthly burdens, is the ultimate comfort. As the last echoes of the medieval world fade, allow your thoughts to drift. The sun sets, the day's toil is done, and the long, slow quiet of the night descends. The rustic hut, the endless fields, the simple lives lived so long ago they all recede into the gentle mist of time. Feel the softness of your own bed, the warmth of your covers, the peaceful hum of your surroundings. Let the ancient dust of that forgotten age settle, leaving only a sense of calm. The worries of the day, like the distant memories of a life so different from your own, are now far away. Breathe deeply, softly. Just breathe.